Hello and welcome to Homicide Hobbies. I'm Andy,
And I'm Claire.
and we're here to talk about some of the disturbing things that go on in the world, past and present. We feel like not knowing doesn't mean the crazy doesn't exist.
So we're going to scar you with the knowing.
Enjoy.
Well, what do you got for us today, Claire?
Claire Bear. Hey, remember the rhyme when we were growing up? Mom used to sing, "The Claire Bear wears no underwear."
He has got jokes today. Chokey.
It's funny. Anyway, what are we talking about?
Oh, there it is. Okay. Can get the show pony on the road. Today we're going to talk about...
Pony.
Andrea. Today we're going to talk about 23... Fuck you, Andrea. God messed me up. Today we're going to talk about...
ain't even started.
Today we're going to talk about 23-year-old Diane Spencer. Our where is going to be Wayland, Michigan.
Because we're whaling.
Good one.
So what'd good old Diane do?
We're going to begin with what started as a typical day in September 1990, when Diane would make a frantic 911 call that her 5-month-old baby was struggling to breathe and had an erratic heartbeat. She needed help right now. Now, EMS would arrive too late, and little tiny baby Aaron, just 5 months old, was already dead.
What the hell, Claire? Where are my triggers? It's a baby.
Oops.
It's a teeny tiny little wee thing. I need my triggers. You just bumped off a baby without any warning?
I know, in record time, huh?
Yeah.
Anyway, so police had no reason to suspect Diane's story of other than just randomly her baby needed help. So they hawk up his death to SIDS, which is sudden infant death. Anybody who hasn't listened to us before, hopefully you know what it is. If not, look it up. It happens to be the third highest cause of death of infants in the United States. And when we get through this
Bullshit.
I'm just going to tell you, I have my doubts that that's the case.
From the cases we've done, I highly doubt that half the cases that are reported as SIDS were actually a SIDS case.
Exactly. But their investigation, which seemed like them just checking boxes, took a turn when they find out that this wasn't the first child of Diane's to pass away suddenly, but her third.
What?
Right? So naturally, the officers are thinking, it's time to talk to Mommy Dearest.
You think?
Diane would be brought in for questioning in December, still 1990. She would be distraught and weepy, which was to be expected by detectives. But what they didn't expect was that she would immediately break down completely and admit to killing Aaron. She had placed a pillow over his face while she was cradling him. She even went as far as to demonstrate it to detectives just how she managed to hold him and place a pillow over his tiny little face.
Oh my gosh. Claire, that's awful.
Now, during her 5.5-hour conversation with detectives, she would cry about being ignored and unloved.
Unloved? I wouldn't love the bitch either. She just admitted to killing her baby.
Well, she would drop hints about her childhood abuse she suffered and bad relationships, saying, I never mattered to anyone. It was always the same.
Turns out she still doesn't fucking matter. I don't understand how people can kill their babies.
Well, she put a pillow over his face.
I get that, you asswipe. What I'm saying is I don't understand what the thought process of...
Did you just call me toilet paper?
Sure did.
I can't laugh through this part, Andrea, so you're going to need to settle the fuck down. No, shut the fuck up. Dead babies, Andrea. Dead babies. This is serious.
That was not called for, ma'am.
Now, her confession didn't stop with Aaron's murder. She proceeded to tell detectives about how she also had 2 baby girls, Autumn, Dawn, and Joyce. Now, we're going to put a pin in that, and let's rewind a bit back before all the baby deaths to September 1982, when Diane is just 14 years old. So Diane packs her bags and runs away from home. She hitches a ride from a 28-year-old truck driver, Jimmy Donachik. Now, I'd like to take a moment there.
What year is that?
1982.
Did she not hear anything about the 70s? I realize she's 14, but I feel like that's fresh into the 80s to where there was a lot of bad things happening in the 70s. I don't feel like hitchhiking is a very brilliant idea.
Well, that's why I was saying I'd like to take a pause here and reflect on just how lucky she is to not have turned up missing.
Although it turns out apparently she has 3 children that it would have been.
I know. So it's like, is she lucky? Or if we would have snuffed her out early on, we wouldn't have the tragedies that took place. Now, it doesn't take long for her and Jimmy to develop a sexual relationship, and then Diane becomes
He's
pregnant.
a fucking dirty pig. Sorry. I didn't. I'm just sitting here listening to the fact that you said 28 and she's 14.
You're right.
I mean, that's pretty friggin'. He's a pedophile.
So Diane would end up pregnant, and in June,
yep, dirty pig.
And in June, she goes into labor, and Jimmy was swell enough to take his 15-year-old girlfriend to the hospital, but he had to hit the road before baby Joyce was born. I feel like it was
because he didn't want the police. Yeah.
I feel like it was to avoid the law, but he had to hit the road, so he wouldn't make his way back for 4 weeks and would only visit for a short while, roughly 2 to 3 days, before hitting the road again.
I don't know why, but I hear our mother singing that song, "Hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back." Okay, anyway, continue.
His name was Jimmy, Andrea.
It can be whatever the hell I want it to be. He's a dirty ass pervert. He knocked up a 14-year-old, dropped her off at the hospital, and said, "Peace out. I'll catch you on the flip side."
Well, he would be gone for several weeks before coming back, seeing Joyce for a little bit, but then Joyce would end up dead. That would be the death of baby number 1. Now, Diane refused an autopsy on the basis she didn't want her baby cut up and opted to bury her just the way she was.
I didn't realize it was an option. I thought if they died under suspicious circumstances that it was like required.
So my thoughts on that one was evidently she was so hysterical that I think they did like the shifty eye thing and were just like, it was probably Sid's anyway kind of thing, which doesn't make it better because why wouldn't you want to know what happened to your baby? Like,
yeah.
Now's the time to figure it out. You'll have regrets if you spend the rest of your life wondering what the fuck happened to your kid.
Turns out she didn't need to know, apparently.
Yeah. So no specific cause of death was found, and they assume it's Sid's.
I'm just going to say that the law didn't do their job because a 14-year-old that gives birth, that should have been investigated all on its very own. But then the baby dies? Mm-hmm. How is that not looked into further? It's already a statutory rape case as is.
Well, it was the 80s.
I don't care.
Now Diane and Jimmy's relationship would end a little bit after Joyce's death. Now that love never resulted in marriage, regardless of the fact that when Joyce died, she would say Jimmy was her husband. So that could also be the side to it that they didn't pursue it because they just thought this was a weird little situation going on. Or Diane's just a fibber. But not surprising, Diane would develop a love for drugs and would find herself in and out of the county jail. So much so that by 1986, Diane would marry Donald Spencer, also a drug user, while they were both incarcerated at Clearfield County Jail.
I didn't know that inmates could marry each other. Like they met in jail? They like passed each other in the dining. What's it called? It's not a dining hall. What the hell? The cafeteria. It's not. What is it? It's mess hall for military.
Andrea, I don't spend time in the prisons.
Me neither.
I wonder. Hey, hold up. Does that mean the county paid for their reception?
Yes, it does. It was real fancy like.
Now I don't know if this was a matter of since. I don't even know how you could even do this one, but if it maybe that their wedding was supposed to occur, so they just continued on, or like, I just didn't know inmates could get married is all. I feel like they're in there to be thinking about what they did. It's like an adult timeout. They're not supposed to be doing other things in there.
So I'm curious, from age 14 to what age is she now? Adult, obviously. She's Is she like 18, 19, 20?
18.
Okay, so where was she for the last 3-4 years?
Oh, wait, 20.
So where was she for the last 6 years?
I done told you that she fell in love with some drugs and was in and out of county jail.
As a minor?
Look, Andrea, I'm not a doctor.
Like, where was she for age 14, 15, 16, 17?
Hey, I done told you where she was when she was 14. She hitched her wagon to a truck driver and was pregnant with him for a good bit. Then when she was 15, then she squeezed out Joyce. Joyce died, and that's year 15 is already gone by. So she's already on the 16 when she's doing her drugging. And
All right.
the bad kids, when they're teens, they can be emancipated. Nobody gives a shit what they're doing because they're bad. So that's what I feel like happened with Diane. She's a basket full of fuck-upperies and is on her way downhill quickly when she drops on to the drug train. Anyway, she'd get married to Donald. Then came her other baby in September 1987. Baby Autumn Dawn, who was just 15 years old when she suddenly died.
She was 15 when she died?
Days old.
Oh.
Q-tip.
Oh my gosh.
Autumn's death would be attributed to SIDS. Now, Autumn's dad was one that was described as being off doing drugs all the time, so it wasn't much of a relationship to begin with, let alone a marriage. Now, fast forward to those 3 years later when Aaron dies at 5 months. Now, his dad was in jail on drug charges, so he's definitely not winning Father of the Year. He seems to only come in and out of the house long enough to knock her up.
They're real fertile.
Now, not to scare our mothers or soon-to-be mothers out there, where SIDS is the third highest cause of death for infants, it's not so common that you would have 3 babies die of it in the same dang family. Now, the odds of one baby dying of SIDS is supposedly 1 in 10,000. So 2 babies would be a remote chance, but 3 would be next to impossible, especially 3 out of 3.
All 3 were diagnosed as of dying of SIDS?
Right, that's why officers did a, that is wildly a remote.
Suspicious?
Right.
All right. So.
Now, Diane would describe just how she killed her baby girls. With Joyce, she suffocated her with her blanket.
Suffocate her with a blanket.
With Autumn, she had held a towel over her face while she lay in her crib.
Oh my gosh. Your case makes me want to cry. Don't laugh.
Somebody needs to for the
you sick son of a bitch.
Somebody needs to for these little babies.
It's sad.
Now, with Joyce and Autumn, they were both killed in Pennsylvania. So I say a round of applause or a way to go, pat on your back, whatever you want to say, to detectives for tracking those suspicious deaths, because Aaron died in Michigan. So if they wouldn't have stumbled on it and then run down that this case stinks kind of thing, she would have gone on to crank out however many, whoever knows, kids and smother them too. Now, she wouldn't even stop there. Now, before Joyce was born, she would claim that she had a 2-year-old that died in a car accident, but no one had heard of that death, and mind you, she would have been 12 or 13 when she had that baby. And Jimmy, the first baby, supposedly Joyce's dad, would say that he had never heard of Diane having a child before she was pregnant with Joyce. But I don't feel like they were around each other long enough for them to really know each other.
I don't know very many teenage boys that are paying attention to...
Well, Jimmy wasn't a teenage boy anyway. He was an adult, 28. He should have been paying attention to more than where his pecker was going, but we got off track. Now, Jimmy's stepmom would say that Diane had gotten pregnant with another child by Jimmy, but had put that baby up for adoption in 1984. Now, Jimmy would say he never heard of Diane having another child after Joyce, let alone his. Not that, again, I would be surprised at either. Now, when police asked Diane about this supposed baby, she would say she did not have a baby put up for adoption. She said she miscarried at 5 months, although there are no medical records to validate that claim. So I don't know if that was a ploy to try to get Jimmy to come back to her if he thought she was pregnant again and it just didn't work, or that since he didn't stick around for the first one, maybe she was just being vindictive and thought that maybe she'd stick it to him that 2 of his babies died, or 1 baby died and 1 she gave up.
Turns out he was sticking it to her.
Turns out he didn't give a shit after he left. So
you get it? He was stinking it in her.
I got it. Now, authorities decide to exhume the body of Joyce since she didn't have an autopsy, and they're deciding they need to take a peek, see what they can find. Now, Diane would hear this and write a note to authorities. I believe this to be totally unnecessary at this point, and am willing to do whatever I myself or authorities in Pennsylvania deem necessary to prevent exhumation.
Yeah, her opinion doesn't matter ever again. I don't care what her upraising or whatever's happened to her. The second she killed one baby, she loses rights as to what happens with that child.
Did you call it her upraising?
Let's not get started on the things you miss, Spike.
You're right. Let's not go down that one. So Joyce would be exhumed within 2 weeks, and her cause of death would be changed to asphyxiation.
Poor baby.
Now, Autumn's body had an autopsy, but she had a cause of death of SIDS. Now, Dr. Nabil Saeed would say, there's not much you can find in a suffocation, really, in regards to why Autumn's death was listed as SIDS and not suffocation. Which, to me, I was a little confused, and I'm the first one to say I'm not a doctor. However, I don't understand if you can't tell a cause of death, how do you just list one?
Yeah, wouldn't it just be cause of death unknown?
Well, and then I'm real confused. If you can't tell the difference between SIDS and a suffocation, then how do we know all these babies that apparently 1 in 10,000 are getting killed by SIDS and not their own crazy whack job mother just putting their face into a pillow? And then, if you're running down that rabbit hole, what's the point of exhuming a body if you can't tell one from the other? Clearly the baby's dead. We don't need to dig her up to prove it. So what really was the point?
Yeah.
But don't know if you're there yet, but are you wondering yet what would make a mother kill her 3 helpless babies?
No, because there's no excuse you're going to tell me that justifies it.
Most people would assume mental illness or postpartum depression or blah, 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 blah. But Diane wouldn't claim any of that. Her reason, you ready for this one?
No.
That no matter how much she tried, and she tried awful hard, the babies didn't love her back.
What?
I know.
They were babies. What did she expect?
Yeah.
How? What?
It's unclear to everyone, me included, and it sounds like you, just how she expected the babies to demonstrate their love for their mother at such a young age is unknown.
All right. So she is a whack job. Got it.
I know. I was just like, so she didn't claim mental illness. I would say that reason alone checks the box of mental illness.
This case is disturbing.
It is. I'm still disturbed that you can't tell the difference between SIDS and suffocation. It's alarming, frankly. If Diane wouldn't have snuffed out a 3rd child, no one would have looked at her.
That's scary.
So Diane would go on trial in Michigan in March 1992 for the murder of Aaron. Now, her attorney would attempt to have her confession thrown out and attempt to have her declared unfit to stand trial. Now, Diane would take the position that officers pressured her into making a confession and that she really did find all 3 of her children not breathing in their cribs and then called for help.
Yeah, I'm sure that she did. It was after she suffocated all of them and then put them back in their beds, and then she's like, oh, look, they ain't breathing. I should call for help. Help.
No, well, she would say they pressured her into confessing because, like with Aaron, when he had a rapid heartbeat and she called 911, she had started CPR on him and she felt like a failure because she didn't save his life. So when the police brought her in, they made her think that she was responsible for his death, and that's what she confessed to because she felt like since she didn't save her baby boy, that she must have caused his death. To which I was a little concerned because, one, when I first read it, the 911 call, I thought it was weird for somebody without any medical experience. I think it's real weird for her to know he's got a rapid pulse.
Unless she was on the phone with 911 and they did like does he have a pulse? Maybe it just felt rapid.
Fine.
And as for her feeling guilty, like she didn't save him, I can get behind that because as you know, I have a child that passed away when he was 2 months old, and I felt so responsible for that, even though I was not responsible.
You didn't smother him either.
No, but I felt like I failed him as a little tiny helpless baby. Like there should have been more that I could have done for him. So I kind of get that mindset.
Well, all of that failed, and she would be found guilty of 1st-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. Now, mind you, That was in Michigan. Pennsylvania wanted to get their hands on her for the death of the 2 baby girls, with the intent of seeking the death penalty for her smothering ass.
But if they can't prove how the girls died, how would they make that case stick?
So they exhumed the body of Joyce and had the cause of death changed on both her death certificate and for Autumn, that the cause of death was asphyxiation. But now, mind you, the case would fall apart due to lack of evidence, because in Pennsylvania, murder cases in particular, prosecutors must not only produce a body, but also have to establish a criminal act occurred before a confession can be entered. They couldn't do that. So charges would eventually be dropped on the 2 little girls' murders, sparing Diane a death sentence. So this bitch is just rotting away with no hope for parole. And I hope she continues to for a good long time before being smothered by her cellmate with a crusty toe cheese sock.
I thought you were going to say with a crusty toe cheese vagina.
What? Is that a thing?
I don't know. That's where I thought you were going with it.
Can I ask how toe cheese would get into one's vagina?
I don't know what they're doing.
Especially if it's their own. You don't know what recreational activities occur in the prisons?
Sure don't.
Not that I do.
Hey, but on a serious note, you said that she was supposedly had a 2-year-old, right? That passed away.
Uh-huh.
And that would have put her at 12. And if she ran away at 14, like that adds up. So maybe the 2-year-old dying is what pushed her over the edge.
I could see that. I also was kind of curious if there was no, like, a 2-year-old, her having a 2-year-old. I don't know how far back they tried to dig, but since this was in the 80s, like late 70s, maybe her parents decided to make it seem like it was a sibling, like send her away kind of thing.
Yeah.
Until she has the baby, and then when it comes back, that she suddenly got a new sibling, but she's grappling with that whole
her child died.
It's not her baby, but it is.
Yeah.
It is her baby. And then if it is a tragic accident and her 2-year-old daughter / now sibling that she can't even talk to anybody about, like,
yeah,
because they were brushing shit under their rug left and right, so I could see them not address anything.
But then if you throw in, I know you did the hormones, blah, blah, blah. But you figure at 12, she's a baby still. Her hormones are already going through so much, just hitting puberty, to turn around and give birth and then have your child basically taken away and is now being raised by, we're just assuming, her parents, or maybe an aunt or uncle took the child, maybe somebody else took that baby.
Yeah.
But to not have control over your own life. As an adult, we see people spiral. So to have a young teenager with the surge of hormones after giving birth and then having something as tragic as that child dying and having no way, no outlet, the drug use, the running away, it makes sense. Plus, you don't know who fathered that baby.
Yeah, I was going to say, it could have been somebody near to the gene pool. Not saying it was, but not saying it wasn't either. And that could explain why when she hitched a ride with a trucker, she was real eager to drop her panties.
Ew.
Maybe she was trying to replace baby number 1.
Yeah.
Because the fact that by the time she's a runaway, it's almost 9 months exactly. So it wasn't like they were riding around the countryside and then romance started brewing. No, the door was barely shut to that truck.
Ew.
But I don't know what kind of currency people use, so maybe she was paying in pussy.
That's really sad.
It really is. And I'm real surprised that they didn't find some sort of mental defect or all of her tragic things. Now, there's also the wiggle room of whatever baby she claimed she put up for adoption, but then when she was asked directly about it, she said she had a miscarriage, of just whether or not she's just full of fucking shit.
Well, I thought the stepmom said that she put a baby up for adoption. She didn't.
She did. Well, yeah. So the stepmom did. That was the story Diane had told the stepmom to Jimmy.
Maybe the stepmom did like our mother and only did the half listening, and maybe the 2-year-old that died is the 2-year-old she was forced to put up for adoption. And maybe, like I said, maybe an aunt or an uncle or somebody had adopted it and then that baby died and it was like her cousin instead of a sibling.
I still don't eliminate her being bitter. And I do feel like she punished each one of those babies for picking shitty dads.
That's awful.
Mm-hmm. That I do feel like, if not to blame the dads ish, but you figure it was only when they were gone that she would be so mad and frustrated because clearly she had a picture in her head what her fairy tale ending would be. And none of those visions had her being a single parent. And
No.
look, if that's going to happen.
Yeah, so it sounds like she took it out on the babies because they didn't live up to her expectations.
And part of me was curious how exactly she worded to detectives that she killed the babies because they didn't love her. Did she say the babies didn't love her?
Or the men.
Right. Because I could see her sobbing and like, why'd you do it? And these men folk here, they didn't love me. And they're just reading it on face value of the babies didn't love you. And she could still be in her own head of crying and saying no matter how hard she tried, it was always the same. She was never loved, blah, blah, blah. But she's still talking about the dads, not the babies. The babies were collateral damage at this point. She was focused so much on wanting to be loved by her husband or whatever that she tried, and she was just wiping the slate clean every time and trying to move on.
Makes sense. It's terrible.
Sadly, it does.
That's kind of like your other case.
I know. These crazy witches, which seriously has me real concerned for all these babies that, like Sid's deaths. Because I'm not kidding. You have a doctor on record, not saying how great of a doctor this one is, but that you can't really tell the difference between suffocation and SIDS. So how do we know all these 1 in 10,000s are legitimate? And how do we even know SIDS exists?
Well, I think the few parents out there that actually had children pass from SIDS will attest to the fact that it's a thing.
No, they can only attest that they didn't smother their child. They can't attest that something else didn't. The crazy cat that wandered in the room and sat on its face, or the uncle that was supposed to be babysitting, or the other child in the house.
Way to make all of the population stare at their...
Paranoid?
Yes.
Make their babies sleep in a locked head device.
What?
Like a helmet so they can't be smothered.
Oh.
Oh, I nearly forgot one. I don't know how I forgot this little nugget. One of the other telling pieces in Aaron's case was, so when he was like I want to say a week or two old, he had a time where he had stopped breathing or like a near scrape with SIDS. So they had a device that he would hook up to monitor his breathing just to be ahead of it. That way there would be an alert if he stopped breathing. Well, that device had been turned off and then turned back on during the chunk he died. Now, she would say she woke him up, fed him, and then they both fell asleep on the couch, and then she woke up when he was struggling to breathe. Now, what I find interesting is if also at trial, she's going to claim that she found all 3 of her kids dead in their cribs. Well, I thought he was just on the couch. It can't be both. But I feel like that was the nail in her coffin for his trial, because when you factor in, it's a little suspicious.
Just a lot of suspicious. We hope you enjoyed today's episode of Homicide Hobbies. If we made you laugh, if we made you cry, or if we mind-fucked you for the day, then we thank you for listening. Please write a review on whatever you're listening to us on. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your coworkers. We're freaking awesome. And join us next week for another episode of Homicide Hobbies. I'm Andy.
And I'm Claire.
That's all we've got.